The salt air whipped around me as I sat on the lonely beach that afternoon, the waves crashing relentlessly against the shore mirroring the turmoil inside my head. I had driven out from Los Angeles to this quiet stretch near Malibu to escape the constant pressure from my family back in Texas, who kept pushing me to find a nice girl and settle down, never suspecting the truth that I, Ezra Thompson, had been hiding my entire adult life. At 28, I was a successful graphic designer with a nice apartment in Silver Lake, but inside I was lost, battling the fear of what admitting I was gay would do to the only family I had ever known. The sun was dipping low, painting the ocean in oranges and pinks, but my thoughts were dark, replaying every holiday argument where my father would clap me on the back and ask when I was going to man up and start a family. Then, as if the universe had planned it, a familiar voice called out from down the beach. "Ezra? No way, is that really you?" I looked up to see Damian Hayes, my best friend from college days in New York, walking toward me with that same easy grin that had always made my heart race a little too fast. We hadn't seen each other in 5 years since he moved to San Francisco for his finance job, and here he was, looking fit and confident in board shorts and a faded UCLA t-shirt, his blonde hair tousled by the wind. We hugged like old times, the kind of hug that lingered just a second too long for two guys who were supposedly just buddies. And as we sat down on the warm sand to catch up, the conversation flowed effortlessly from old memories of late-night study sessions to current lives. He told me he was between contracts, traveling light, and seemed genuinely happy to run into me. But as the sun began to set and the beach remained empty except for us, something inside me snapped. The years of suppression bubbled up like the tide, and in a voice shaking with emotion I said it out loud for the first time to another living soul. "Damian, I have to tell you something. I've been in love with you since our college days. I know it's crazy, and you're probably straight, but I couldn't keep it in anymore." His blue eyes widened, the silence stretching between us like the endless Pacific horizon. I braced for rejection, for the awkward laugh, for him to stand up and walk away. Instead he reached out and took my hand, his palm warm and steady against my suddenly cold skin. "Ezra, I've been feeling the same way but was too scared to admit it even to myself," he whispered. That moment, the kiss happened naturally, soft and tentative at first, then filled with all the pent-up feelings we had both buried for years. It tasted like salt and relief and the beginning of something terrifying and beautiful. We pulled back, foreheads touching, breathing hard, and for the first time in my life I felt seen. We talked until the stars came out, sharing every hidden fear, every quiet moment in college when our eyes had lingered too long. Damian admitted he had dated women because it was easier, safer, but none of it ever felt right. I told him about the nights I lay awake wondering if I would die alone rather than disappoint my parents. By the time we walked back to the parking lot, hand in hand under the moonlight, we had made a promise to figure this out together, no matter what. The drive back to my apartment in the city was quiet but charged, the radio playing soft indie rock while our fingers stayed intertwined on the gear shift. When we got inside, we didn't rush anything. We just sat on the couch and kept talking, the weight of years lifting with every honest word. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a cage. It felt like possibility. Yet even in that glow, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that the world outside this apartment wasn't ready, and neither were the people who raised me. Still, with Damian's head resting on my shoulder, I let myself believe we could face it. The next morning the city buzzed around us like nothing had changed, but inside my Silver Lake apartment everything had. Damian stayed for coffee, then breakfast, then lunch, and by evening we were laughing over old photos on my laptop, the kind of easy comfort that only comes from someone who already knows your soul. We decided to take it slow, to let whatever this was breathe before telling anyone, but the connection was undeniable. Over the next few weeks we built a quiet routine. Weekend hikes in Griffith Park where we could hold hands without fear, late-night talks on my balcony overlooking the Hollywood sign, stolen kisses in the kitchen while making pasta. Damian started commuting from San Francisco on weekends, crashing at my place, and for the first time I felt like I was living instead of performing. At work my designs flowed better, colors brighter, as if the truth had unlocked something creative inside me. But cracks began to appear when I confided in my closest coworker, Marcus, over drinks one Friday. "You and Damian? Dude, that's huge," he said, clapping me on the back, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. A week later, I overheard him on a call mentioning Ezra's new situation, in a tone that made my stomach drop. I brushed it off, telling myself paranoia was part of coming out, but the doubt lingered. Damian and I talked about it late one night, curled up on the couch. "My family in Texas still thinks I'm dating that girl from college," I confessed, the words tasting bitter. He squeezed my hand. "We'll tell them when we're ready. No rush." But ready never felt close enough. One Sunday, his phone buzzed with a text from his own parents inviting him home to Sacramento for Thanksgiving. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "As my friend first, then we'll see." The idea terrified me, but his eyes held so much hope I agreed. The drive north was filled with playlists and stories, yet every mile marker felt like a countdown. When we pulled into his parents' driveway, the house looked exactly as I remembered from college visits. Neat lawn, American flag, the smell of apple pie drifting from the open window. His mother hugged me like a long-lost son. His father clapped my shoulder and asked about my job. For 3 days we played the part of old college buddies, but every shared glance across the dinner table felt electric. On the last night, after his parents went to bed, Damian pulled me into the backyard under the stars. "I don't want to hide anymore," he whispered before kissing me again, deeper this time, full of promise. We drove back to Los Angeles the next morning lighter, already planning how to ease our families into the truth. Little did we know that Marcus had posted a vague but unmistakable photo from our last group hike on social media, tagged with hearts, and my mother had seen it. The first call came while I was at work, my father's voice tight with confusion. "Son, what's this picture? Who's the guy?" I froze, heart hammering, realizing the careful world I had built was already starting to crack. Damian was beside me that evening when I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come right. Instead, we held each other and promised that whatever came next, we would face it together. The loneliness of that beach afternoon felt like a lifetime ago. Now I had someone who truly saw me, and that made every risk worth taking. Thanksgiving passed in a blur of forced normalcy, but the text from my mother arrived the Monday after. "We need to talk. Come home this weekend." Damian offered to fly with me to Texas, but I told him I needed to do this part alone first, to soften the blow before bringing him into the storm. The flight to Dallas felt like stepping into a different life. My childhood home in Plano still smelled of lemon cleaner and my father's aftershave. They sat me down at the kitchen table the moment I walked in, faces serious. "That picture on Facebook," my father started, voice low. "Is there something you want to tell us, Ezra?" I took a deep breath and said the words I had practiced with Damian on the phone the night before. "Dad, Mom, I'm gay. And I've met someone, his name is Damian. He makes me happy." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. My mother's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. My father stood up so fast the chair scraped. "We didn't raise you this way," he said, voice cracking. "This isn't you. It's a phase. Some West Coast nonsense." The argument lasted hours, every Bible verse, every childhood memory weaponized against me. I tried to explain it wasn't a choice, that I had fought it for years, that Damian was kind and real. They wouldn't hear it. By midnight my father had packed my old duffel bag and set it by the door. "Until you sort yourself out, you're not welcome here." My mother hugged me goodbye in the driveway, whispering, "I love you, but I can't watch you throw your life away." The drive back to the airport was a blur of tears and highway lights. I called Damian from the terminal, voice breaking, and he booked the next flight to meet me in LA. When he arrived at my apartment the next morning, he held me while I cried for the family I had just lost. But the betrayal cut deeper when Marcus texted me an apology. "Your mom called me after seeing the photo. I didn't mean for it to blow up." The realization that my own friend had accelerated the collapse stung worse than the disownment. Damian suggested we take a weekend away, just the two of us, to process. We drove up the coast to Big Sur, rented a small cabin with ocean views, and spent the days walking trails and talking through the pain. He shared his own fears about telling his parents, how he worried they would react the same. In the quiet evenings by the fireplace, we made promises to build our own family, one based on honesty. Yet every time my phone buzzed with a text from my sister saying, "Dad's still upset," the wound reopened. Damian never pushed, never asked me to choose. He simply showed up, cooking meals, listening, reminding me I wasn't alone. By the time we returned to the city, I felt raw but stronger. The loneliness of that first beach afternoon replaced by a new kind of courage. Still, the family silence stretched on. A constant ache I carried into every workday and every quiet night. Winter brought shorter days and longer shadows. My mother's weekly texts asking if I had come to my senses grew colder until they stopped altogether. Damian's parents in Sacramento reacted with stunned silence, followed by a polite but distant invitation to give them time. The financial fallout hit next when my father, who co-signed my student loans, quietly removed his name and left me scrambling. Damian stepped up without hesitation, moving his things from San Francisco into my Silver Lake apartment permanently and taking on extra consulting gigs to cover the gap. "We're in this together," he said one night while we sorted bills at the kitchen table, his hand steady on mine. But the pressure started to wear on us both. At work, I received sideways glances after Marcus's loose lips spread the news through the office grapevine. One client even pulled a project, citing personal values. Damian faced his own battles when his boss, an old-school finance guy, made a passing comment about family men getting promoted first. The misunderstandings piled up. A friend of Damian's from college accused me of turning him gay, and another mutual acquaintance stopped returning calls. The lowest point came on Christmas Eve when my sister called to say the family was gathering without me, and that Dad had asked her not to mention my name. I hung up and cried in Damian's arms while he whispered that we would make our own traditions. We decorated a tiny tree, cooked a simple dinner, and exchanged small gifts, a leather notebook for me, a watch engraved with our beach date for him. In that quiet apartment, we found joy amid the loss, but the sacrifices were real. Damian gave up a dream promotion that required travel because he refused to leave me alone during the holidays. I turned down a freelance job in New York because flying home for visits was no longer an option. Through it all, we leaned on each other, learning that love wasn't just butterflies on a beach, but showing up when the world turned its back. Therapy helped. I started sessions with a counselor who specialized in family rejection, and slowly the knot in my chest loosened. Damian joined for a few joint appointments, and we practiced setting boundaries and communicating without fear. By spring, the raw edges had softened into something steadier, a foundation built on choice rather than obligation. Yet the ache for my family never fully left, a quiet companion that reminded me daily of the cost of honesty. Spring in Los Angeles brought wildflowers and a fragile sense of renewal. Damian and I had settled into a rhythm that felt like home. Morning coffee on the balcony, weekend farmers market runs, quiet evenings reading side by side. The therapy work paid off. I stopped flinching every time my phone rang with an unknown Texas area code. Damian grew more confident too, updating his social media with photos of us without hiding captions. Then came the misunderstanding that nearly broke us. His childhood best friend, Ryan, visited from Sacramento and pulled Damian aside during dinner. "You're throwing your life away," Ryan said loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. "Your parents are devastated. Come home. Figure this out." Damian defended us fiercely, but the words planted doubt. That night we argued for the first time, voices raised in the living room. "Maybe I'm asking too much of you," I said, tears stinging. "Your whole world is changing because of me." He grabbed my shoulders. "This is my choice, Ezra. Don't you dare push me away now." We didn't sleep, just talked until dawn, airing every fear we had buried. The next morning he drove Ryan to the airport and came back lighter, declaring he was done letting other people's opinions dictate our future. The real turning point arrived when my sister texted out of the blue. "Dad had a heart scare. He's okay. But he asked about you. I flew to Texas alone, heart in my throat. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. My father looked smaller in the bed, and for the first time he listened when I spoke about Damian, about the beach, about the man who had stood by me when they couldn't. He didn't apologize, not fully, but he squeezed my hand and said, "I don't understand it, but I don't want to lose my son." My mother cried and hugged me in the hallway. It wasn't acceptance yet, but it was a crack in the wall. I flew home and told Damian everything. He listened, then booked us a weekend back at the same Malibu beach where it all started. Walking the sand at sunset, he dropped to one knee, not with a ring, but with a simple key to a new apartment we could choose together. "No more hiding, no more sacrificing alone," he said. "Let's build the life we want." In that moment, the growth felt real. I had faced the worst and come out stronger, and so had he. Summer returned with the same salty breeze that had witnessed our beginning. The new apartment in Echo Park had big windows and a tiny patio where we planted herbs and hosted small dinners with friends who had stuck by us. My parents visited once, awkward but trying, sitting on the couch while Damian cooked his mother's lasagna recipe. Conversations stayed surface level, but the hugs goodbye felt warmer than before. Damian's family followed a few weeks later, bringing pie and cautious questions that slowly turned into genuine curiosity. The road wasn't smooth. Old friends still drifted away. Work occasionally tested us, but the foundation we had built held. On the anniversary of that lonely beach afternoon, we drove back to Malibu at dusk, spreading a blanket in the exact spot where I had first confessed. The waves whispered the same rhythm, but this time our hands stayed linked without fear. Damian pulled me close as the sun dipped below the horizon, his voice soft against my ear. "Thank you for being brave that day." I smiled, the weight of every tear and argument lifting into the golden light. We had lost pieces of our old lives, but we had gained something unbreakable: each other and the truest versions of ourselves. Looking out at the ocean that had once mirrored my isolation, I saw only possibility stretching endlessly ahead. The journey had been painful, filled with betrayal and sacrifice, but every step had led us here, to a love that refused to stay hidden. True or false? A single honest confession between two men on a lonely beach can destroy family ties, yet still be the best decision of their lives?